Story 1. When I was 16, the band Winger came into the record store where I worked for an autograph appearance. I was the youngest with the least amount of seniority, so they placed me in the very back of the store working the video section, far away from the band. Kip Winger's girlfriend at the time was Rachel Hunter. She had just done her first Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue and was dressed like a rock star's girlfriend, black leather miniskirt with a leopard print bra top. She was stunningly radiant, amazingly so. You could hear the angels sing when she looked at you. Here I was, a nerdy 16-year-old, and she hung out with me for 2 hours and treated me like a real person. She was sweet and breathtakingly gorgeous. For some strange reason, she still went home with Kip instead of me. Story 2. I was in Poland, and there was a woman waiting for the bus. I looked at her and thought, she is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. To this day, if I see another attractive woman, I always think, she is not as beautiful as that woman at the bus stop. There are models and actresses who could not hold a candle to her. The fact that she was just a normal person waiting for the bus, instead of working for a modeling agency or in the movies, was astonishing to me. Story 3. Pierce Brosnan striding down a Dublin street. The top few buttons of his shirt are open. He is a tall man with luxuriant hair. I am a straight man, and I can tell you he is stunningly good-looking. Story 4. I met Gillian Anderson and Jerry Ryan at a comic convention in Niagara Falls. They were both stunningly gorgeous, and the fact that they seemed to be genuinely fantastic people as well amplified their beauty even further. Story 5. I met Jensen Ackles, known for Supernatural and The Boys, and I almost didn't survive it. I have seen him on screen for 9 years, and it did not even compare. Story 6. Green-eyed, long dark hair, white Irish-Mexican girl in my summer school class. It hurt to look at her, but she was so down to earth it made her even hotter. She looked like Jennifer Connelly but hotter. Story 7. I was in a security line at Dublin Airport, and a man was being ushered through his own checkpoint. I was standing right at the end and made direct eye contact with him. It was Cillian Murphy. His eyes are stunning. Story 8. Security at the Moscow Airport International Terminal consisted entirely of tall women with supermodel levels of beauty. It was borderline disturbing. None of them smiled. They were like robots, beautiful, soulless robots. Story 9. One day, back in 1896, I was crossing over to Jersey on the ferry. As we pulled out, there was another ferry pulling in, and on it there was a girl waiting to get off. She had on a white dress and was carrying a white parasol. I only saw her for 1 second. She did not see me at all, but I bet a month has not gone by since then that I have not thought of that girl. Mr. Bernstein, Citizen Kane. Story 10. In 2011, I was in Las Vegas during the Miss Universe event. The contestants all came down to the buffet and to the wave pool at Mandalay Bay. Imagine a group of 30 goddesses just milling about. Story 11. Brad Pitt. I was in New York City in the mid-1990s, and a very attractive man was walking down the street wearing expensive-looking clothes. He caught my eye, and then I realized, holy cow, I believe that is Brad Pitt. I then accidentally walked into a pole because I was staring. The man smiled broadly and kept walking. I'm not sure it was Brad Pitt for real, but my goodness, it was his doppelganger, and he was outstanding. Story 12. Some man was running past me on a jog when I was on my way to the gym about a month ago. He was about 6 feet 2 inches tall with flowing auburn wavy hair. He looked like a god or the statue of David with a 1970s mustache. I was mesmerized but just kept walking. I am pretty sure the last time I was at the gym, he was also there working out near me the entire time I was there. I will never approach him though because I have been having no luck lately and do not want to embarrass myself any further this year. Story 13. I was trying to get into a Blur afterparty in 1999 after a concert in Hollywood, and I saw Mila Jovovich walk out of the party with William Orbit. In my 48 years on Earth, I have not seen anything that comes within a mile of how radiant she was. She was obviously gorgeous, but there was some other transcendent quality about her that I have not experienced since. Story 14. I saw Stone Temple Pilots at Much in the Rain in Toronto pop-up show. Scott Weiland was standing on a fence, grabbed part of the stage overhead, and leaned right out over me, soaking wet, eyeliner and abs and all. I have to go for a minute. Story 15. I was at a Duran Duran concert and was walking to the lobby to use the phone as I had gotten into a car accident on the way to the concert. As I was walking, I noticed an exceptionally tall woman leaning against the wall with an even taller man. He did not register immediately, but I was suddenly struck by how absolutely beautiful this human being was, completely amazed. Then I realized it was Polina Porizkova and the taller person was Rick Ocasek. The thing about models is that they are beautiful, but often the camera just loves their faces almost more than three-dimensional reality. For some reason, the lines of their face translate exceptionally well to two-dimensional print, sometimes even more than when their face is expressive. In the case of Polina, she was actually more beautiful than the camera could show. Story 16. I met Elizabeth Banks in person about 7 years ago. I could barely speak, but I managed not to mess up a self-deprecating joke, and she genuinely laughed at it. That might be the high point of my life. Story 17. I saw Brooke Shields in a restaurant restroom in New York City about 10 years ago. She is the most spectacular human being I have ever encountered. Story 18. A girl in one of my college classes in 2006. I was sitting in my seat on the first day of class watching all the other students slowly come in. I saw this gorgeous girl walk in. She had long, dark hair, green eyes, and was tall and shapely. As she walked past me and took a seat in the back, I remember thinking, she is so gorgeous, but so far out of my league it's not even funny. We have been married for 14 years. It sounds corny, but yes, she is the most beautiful person I have ever seen in real life. Story 19. I met Alexander Skarsgård late at night on the VIP grounds at Coachella. He was very drunk and was feebly fending off the aggressive advances of two even drunker women. I am also deeply in love with Alexander Skarsgård, but I was not about to watch anyone get sexually harassed, so I went up to them and shooed the women away. He rewarded me with the biggest hug. I am a small girl at 5 feet 5 inches, so he lifted me straight off my feet. Safe to say this interaction did nothing to cure me of my love for the man. He was an absolute gentleman. His face is literally perfect, and he is just so tall. Story 20. Met Uma Thurman when I was in high school right around the time of Dangerous Liaisons. I struggled to say the minimal, "Hi, nice to meet you too." Then my mind went blank and I barely avoided hyperventilating and passing out. Story 21. Anna Faris. She is not even really my type. But dear God, in person, she is next level attractive. She was wearing a tight white dress very well. Story 22. In 2001, I was working on Long Island. One of my coworkers, usually a very outgoing, extroverted guy, was acting very sullen one day, sighing and staring off into the distance. "What's with you, man? You seem down." I asked him. "Oh," he said, "I met one of my wife's friends last night, and she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." "Oh," I said, "tell me about her. I like beautiful women." "Well, she's half Italian and half Japanese." "Stop right there," I said. "That must be a good combination." I went to high school with a girl who was half Italian and half Japanese. She was beautiful, just beautiful. She had dark, bottomless eyes, flawless skin, and perfect sensual rosebud lips. There was this aura of serenity around her. Nobody would have been surprised if Hugh Hefner pulled up in a limo to take her away after school one day. Her name was, girl's name. "Oh my God," he said. "That's her." So yeah, this girl I went to high school with was the most beautiful human being I have ever seen. 20 years later, she was still leaving grown men lovelorn, sighing wrecks just by meeting them. There is a reason they use the word stunning to describe very beautiful women, and she was exactly that. The truth is, I am insufficiently eloquent to do her beauty any justice. Story 23. In 2006, Bank of America on Melrose Boulevard in Hollywood reported that 80% of the women who entered through the front door. Story 24. A girl I took an acting class with looked like a red-headed Jan Smithers, also known as Bailey Quarters for my fellow older viewers. Story 25. My wife and I lived in Brooklyn in the same neighborhood where Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys lived and filmed The Americans. Ironically, we did not watch the show until after it ended. It was excellent. One evening, we were walking to dinner, holding hands down Court Street and chatting about whatever. She dropped my hand, and I did not realize right away, so I kept walking and talking. Eventually, I turned around and saw that Kerry Russell had just gotten out of a car next to us. My wife was stunned by how beautiful she was. Once I realized I was too. This was not an awards show night or anything, so it was not a formal event, but she was strikingly beautiful. I do not even remember what we talked about after that. We were both just shocked. Story 26. Angelina Jolie. This was 2006. She was not the only celebrity in the room. She is jaw-dropping. Second would be Penelope Cruz. She gets better looking each time you see her. Story 27. This was more than 20 years ago. I was on the light rail west of Portland, Oregon, and a Native American man got on the train. He had long black hair and was so stunning that it took every ounce of strength I had not to stare. That man was unbelievably gorgeous. Story 28. It is hilarious that all the women here have a good story about meeting a hot, famous movie star, and the men are like, it was a gas station cashier. Story 29. In 2017, my father and I visited my brother in America. We met in New York and traveled to Washington, D.C. by train. I had always wanted to run up the rocky steps at the museum in Philadelphia, and they surprised me with a stop there on the way. We went directly to the steps from the train station. My brother and I got a bit competitive racing up the steps. I was wearing tight jeans, and it was a hot day. At one point, I overstretched and tore my jeans from my seat to my calf. All the luggage was still in the station. My dad had a spare pair of shorts that were too big and unattractive, but I had to use them, so I went behind a bush near the museum and changed. From there, we walked away from the museum back toward the station, passing a small convenience store. We walked another few hundred yards and saw a bar on an adjacent street, so we decided to stop for a beer. We went in and sat at the bar. When the bartender appeared, I was absolutely stunned. She reminded me of Jessica Simpson at her peak, but prettier. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect body. I literally couldn't speak. My dad ordered a pitcher, and like most service workers we met in America, she was very polite and happy to help. She maintained eye contact and smiled, which only made me feel more awkward. Here was this absolute goddess standing in front of us, being so sweet and bringing us beer, and I was sitting there looking a mess. Sweat patches under my arms, frizzy hair from the humidity, and a pair of oversized old dad shorts. It was the most uncomfortable beer I have ever had, and I couldn't get out of there quickly enough. I have seen many pretty girls in my life, but none so pretty that I felt like running away. I hope she is doing well. She was lovely. Story 30. I was crossing the street in New York City at around 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, and Jessica Biel was crossing the other way. This was 15 to 20 years ago, and she legitimately had a golden glow coming off of her. Astonishingly beautiful. Story 31. When I was 17, I was knocked sideways by a boy in the school hallway. I caught him looking at me too. We dated for a couple of years, but finally, he came out on my 20th birthday in my parents' living room. I was not gracious with him at the time, and as the past 40 years have gone by, it has mattered a lot more to me that I be gracious with my 20-year-old self. I know his life appears to be full of success and love, as is mine, and those kids from so long ago must have done lots of good and right things. I wish him nothing but the best, but I do not need to talk to him again. It is okay to forgive but still feel some hurt. Story 32. In 1978, walking around Princes Street in Edinburgh, I saw a tall man over 6 feet with long blonde hair wearing a kilt, striding along. I tripped on a cobblestone. He was such an amazing sight. Unfortunately, my memory is blurry with time, but I have never forgotten that it happened. Story 33. I met Annie Clark before she was performing as St. Vincent. She was in another small-time band that was playing on the same bill as my band. I was amazed by how beautiful she was. I absolutely remembered her face when she became famous. Story 34. I don't think I have ever seen a man more attractive than the current Tom Hardy. He has gained some weight recently, at least as seen in Mobland, compared to young Tom Hardy, and he is aging very well. Additionally, the fact that he loves dogs and is reportedly a good father makes him even more appealing. Story 35. It was 1988, on a trip to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. We were in Kiev, Ukraine. I was 16 and my travel companion was 18 or 19. We were walking down a main thoroughfare and both noticed a woman coming towards us. She was amazing. We both stopped as she walked by and then went into a coffee shop. We followed her in. Neither of us spoke Russian or Ukrainian. We ordered drinks and watched her. She met a very rugged-looking man. He looked at us at one point, and that's when we both snapped out of our reverie. We left and couldn't stop talking about her. Dark hair, either black or dark brown, and the most intense light blue sparkling eyes. Maybe it was my age at the time that made the impression of her stay with me. I'm not sure. I wish I had asked her and the man for a picture, if only to dispel my own mythology. Story 36. I was walking out of my local grocery store when I passed a man coming into the store. I almost stopped walking. He looked like a deity, and I could feel the energy coming off him. It was strong and almost bright, but not arrogant. I cannot quite describe it. Story 37. This random woman at the women's gym I used to frequent was genuinely perfect. She had a voice that could make you want to put your head through a wall. She did not have much of a personality, but physically, I have never seen another woman who looked so good. Story 38. I hired a woman once whom I could barely look at, much to my shame, because of how beautiful she was. She was good at her job, and I promoted her to another location, so it all worked out. Story 39. I saw a woman in a white sundress from my upstairs window, down in my neighbor's yard. She was hanging clothes on the line. She was an unearthly beauty in the mold of Sophia Loren, tall and fine-limbed with dazzling white teeth and an earthy, southern Italian look. Days later, I passed her in front of a row of shops in town and we struck up a conversation. She turned out to be from Italy and was studying dental surgery in the United States. I complimented her on her English and invited her to lunch outdoors with me, but she said she would rather remain clothed. Her name was Story 40. A young woman was walking on the sidewalk in front of me as I got out of my car. She wore a long black dress and had vibrant red hair. I could not say anything to her, even though I desperately wanted to. Story 41. Decades ago, on a trip to Tuscany, I sat next to a security guard from the Uffizi Galleries in Florence who was on his coffee break, and my jaw just dropped. Here we are, 30 years later, and I still remember the man. Story 42. When I was in Rome 25 years ago, a young priest in full black walked by and everyone's head turned. I was in Rome recently, and my cab driver to the train station looked like a Raphael painting come to life. I need to go back to Italy. Story 43. Cindy Crawford and her husband Rand Gerber were in the Bahamas 25 years ago. They looked like Ken and Barbie. I could not stop looking at them. They were in bathing suits. Cindy had no makeup on. Story 44. Some country girl deep in the Norwegian countryside. I am a bartender and see attractive people regularly, but this woman left me literally speechless and blushing. Story 45. In 2014, I saw Sean Lennon's band Ghost of a Saber-Toothed Tiger at a very small venue. There was no backstage area, so the band had to walk through the crowd to get to the steps up to the stage. Sean's girlfriend and bandmate Charlotte Kemp Mull walked past me. I knew she was gorgeous from band photos, but seeing her in person like that was quite something. Story 46. A random woman I saw in a convenience store in the late 1990s. There were 3 of us in the store, including the cashier, when she walked in. She looked like a Playboy model. Felt like time froze. I don't think any of us were even breathing. When she walked out, we all loosened up and said, "Did you just see that?" We were fanning ourselves like cartoon characters getting hot and bothered. I walked out and saw her in her Jeep, parked next to me. At the time, I was driving a 1977 Oldsmobile, which was about 75% rust covered. So I did the only thing I could, which was to walk in the other direction, around the back of the store, so she didn't see me get into the rusty car next to her. I've seen other attractive women before and since, but never had that kind of reaction to one. Story 47. This girl I went to high school with named Amy. She was very pretty and in great shape. She was also very cool. We would smoke marijuana together occasionally. I made the mistake of bringing her to smoke with my girlfriend once. We got quite high, and I drove Amy home. My girlfriend said, "I'll call you when you get home," meaning I should call her when I got home. I was pretty stoned, so I got home and waited for her call. An hour later, the phone rang, and I picked it up. She just yelled, "You were with her." And I made the mistake of responding, "I wish." One time Amy came into school late. She sat behind me in class. Seriously, it was like the room got brighter every time she walked in. That morning, she sat down and said, "Dude, lean over a little bit. I need to put on my makeup." I thought, she isn't wearing any makeup, and she's still that attractive? I didn't say it, but I thought it. I heard she is a personal trainer now, and I suspect she'll look great into her 60s. Honestly, just an amazing girl. Beautiful inside and out. Story 48. When I was in my 20s, I was with a gorgeous French man from Brittany named Georges. We remained friends for years. He was not the man I ended up with. That is okay. My partner is handsome too. Story 49. I have read one story so far about someone meeting Cillian Murphy, but only one. There may be more below, and there are also a lot of comments. If you have met Cillian Murphy, I want to hear about it. Story 50. At a Walmart in the early 2000s. I was in the fishing department with my now ex-husband and brother-in-law. The man had black hair and blue eyes. I just stared at him and could not help it because he was stunning. He also had an amazing aura, I do not know. He was staring at me too. I think the other men noticed how beautiful he was as well because they acted like jerks. Thank you, guys. Story 51. Bindi Irwin. When I look at her, I see an absolute angel from above for some reason. She has a heavenly glow about her. She is just beautiful. Story 52. A man in line behind me at the drugstore. It was 40 years ago, and I still remember his steel blue eyes and long wavy black hair. I stopped dead in my tracks and just stared at him. Story 53. Random flight attendant on a Delta flight. I swear it was so tough to keep my eyes off of her. One of the times I have fallen completely in love with someone without knowing their name. Oh well, hope you were doing well, Delta Hottie. Story 54. Chris Cornell. I saw him at a recording session when he came in to do some extra vocals, and when I tell you my jaw hit the floor, I think there are still some of my molars in hell. This man was stunningly beautiful. Everything is now compared on a scale from 0 to Chris Cornell. Story 55. A woman in Sydney who stopped to ask if she could pet my dog about 4 years ago looked absolutely perfect. Story 56. Not even going to lie, and it is probably going to sound stupid to some, but my boyfriend. I really sat here and thought of every guy I have dated, including the one I married and divorced, and even past coworkers that I found attractive. Truly, my boyfriend tops them all. He wins this. Story 57. This girl was jogging near my high school in 2013. I was in the car and we made eye contact. It was embedded in my mind forever. Years later, my partner told me she used to jog near that high school all the time. They both have the same hair color, if I remember correctly. Story 58. Gregory, a British exchange student in 9th grade, was the most handsome, sexiest, and most stylish boy on earth to me when I was 15. He looked like he had stepped straight out of a film. He was a typical good-looking English boy from an upper-class family in London. It was decades ago, and I still think of him from time to time. Story 59. My girlfriend back in the day had a friend from college visit her, and we all walked around New York City one afternoon. The friend was attractive but not really my type, so it was a regular day. However, guys kept coming out of the woodwork to get the friend's attention, including at one point trying to fight with each other over her at a bar. Some people just have that quality, and I think her southern accent was the icing on that particular cake. At one point, a guy was hitting on her on the steps of St. John the Divine. Story 60. In my younger days in the early 1990s, I worked as a bouncer at a strip club. For a month, we had working for us the hottest, best-looking, and sweetest girl I ever met. Her husband was a Chippendale dancer, and they were the best-looking couple I have ever seen. They were also very nice, humble, and easy to get along with. After that, when I lived in the Florida Keys, you could not throw a conch shell in a bar without hitting a 9 or higher. They were everywhere. Story 61. Jennifer Tilly as Bride of Chucky. I had a crush on her long before that. But oh my God, I have a type, and that type is thick goth. And that voice. You either love it or hate it, but it truly melts me. Story 62. When I was in high school and worked at a grocery store, there was a regular customer who came in. It was always hard not to stare too much. She was a very tall woman with beautiful natural red hair. It was like a goddess was walking around. Her husband was also very attractive, but she had a unique aura. Story 63. When I first came to Hawaii, I was working at the front desk of a hotel in Waikiki, and 3 extremely attractive women checked in. A gorgeous blonde, a sexy redhead, and a perfect Japanese woman. They were there to get things set up for their leader. The religious group called Raelism, and also known as Raelianism, is a UFO religion founded in 1970s France by Claude Vorilhon, now known as Rael. The women were very friendly and flirty. They came to see me several times while I was working, including once to show me their hula outfits, which consisted of coconut shell tops. Fortunately, I was married, or I might be telling a different story about how everything we see is thanks to aliens. Story 64. Padma Lakshmi. On the street in the East Village, it was like looking at a different species. Mind you, I live in New York City and see many good-looking people. This was incomparable. Story 65. Leaving work in Midtown Manhattan about 10 years ago, I ran across the street and started walking next to a gentleman with stunning silver hair. I glanced at him and realized it was Richard Gere. I would be attracted to him. Story 66. My girlfriend is stunning in real life. When we go out in public, complete strangers have approached her and told her how beautiful she is on many occasions. Going to the airport and boarding the airplane is another surprising experience. How I managed to be with someone as gorgeous as she is beyond me. I consider myself average, but she is exceptional. Story 67. I have no idea who this person was. I was at a small family wedding, and they came in for a short time at the reception. It was a pretty small function with mostly family. They walked in, and it was immediately awkward for everyone there. The kind of attractive where you'd be, and I was standing beside your significant other, unable to not gawk. Thankfully, she was only there for a very short time. Not sure if she was staff or just someone passing through to pass regrets that they couldn't stay. But the whole time she was there, all the men were staring at her, and all the women were staring in disgust at their men who couldn't not stare. She left, and eventually it seemed to me like the ladies forgave us collectively. My significant other at the time acknowledged that she had trouble not staring too. But I can only imagine the damage if she had stayed. That poor girl. I can't imagine that being an easy existence. Story 68. Had a date with a girl in college. One date. I don't even remember her name. Somehow I got a date. She was unbelievably stunning. Story 69. Like in person? It was this girl I played with in drinking leagues. I saw her and knew right away she was the prettiest person in the bar. Story 70. I had 2 real celebrity crushes when I was younger. I got to meet them both and lived near one for a while. Both were gorgeous. I met Jessica Alba when she was filming in my city. My friend knew someone who worked on the project, and we happened to bump into him and Jessica on the street. By sheer coincidence, we saw them at a restaurant and later at a movie theater. Jessica said, "I'm not following you, I promise." She was very nice. Even in sweatpants and a baseball hat, she looked amazing. I also had a crush on Kristen Kruk from the show Smallville. She ended up living on my street. Although I never had a conversation with her, we were on a nod and smile basis because I saw her every couple of days. We were at the same restaurant once, and my wife told me to start a conversation with her, but I did not want to bother her. Story 71. This actress, I think her name is Nuran Selik or Selik Nuran. She played a psychologist in Tears of Cali. As soon as I saw her, I knew she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Story 72. Two men. One I saw on the train years ago. He looked like he walked right out of a magazine, beautiful, tall with gorgeous curls. Every man and woman was mesmerized by him and could not stop staring. The other man I saw recently had curly red hair and freckles that spread across his face. He had beautiful eyes and a smile that almost melted me. I was so shy I had to look away. Anyone who gets to wake up next to him every day is a lucky person. Story 73. I met Marissa Tomei backstage in an off-Broadway play in the late 1990s. She was leaning against a pillar, and I didn't realize it was her at first. She was tiny with dyed blonde hair. I was struck by her big dark eyes and had a hard time talking to her, tongue-tied and starstruck. She was insanely beautiful. Story 74. When I was about 15, I watched a National Geographic documentary about children in some of the poorest countries in the world and the work they did to survive and provide for their families. Somewhere in India or Bangladesh, it was an Asian country with dark-skinned people, there was a boy. He was about my age, 15 or 16, and he worked with his father tanning leather hides. He spent all day in a vat of bird droppings used to tan and soften the animal hides. He looked like a real-life version of Mowgli from the Jungle Book. There was an old actor named Sabu, and the boy looked very much like him. You should have seen me on my hands and knees begging my mother to let me find this boy, bring him to the United States, and take care of him. Mom said absolutely not, but I never forgot him. I hope life treated him well. Story 75. In 1988, there was an undergraduate student at my alma mater who looked almost exactly like a young Jane Seymour. Breathtaking, to say the least. Story 76. A wealthy friend took me to a New York Rangers game in 2003. The seats were just a couple of rows up from center ice. A few minutes after the game started, Jennifer Lopez walked in and sat down a few seats to our left. I was completely oblivious. My friend tapped me on the shoulder and asked, "Do you know who Jennifer Lopez is?" "Of course," I replied. "Look over there." There she was, literally radiating. She was and still is the most attractive person I have ever seen. Until I met my wife. Jennifer Lopez finishes a close second. Story 77. I once walked into a bagel shop in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and saw the most stunningly ethereal, beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. I know and have seen gorgeous women often, but never had or since have seen someone with quite that effect. She had the most perfectly symmetrical, visually pleasing features. I just could not stop looking at her and realized how weird that was since everyone else was too. I imagine this was quite a distraction for her in day-to-day life. I do think beauty is subjective, and there are a lot of people whose auras or energies add to or detract from their beauty. But I sincerely don't think a single being could look at her and say she wasn't magical looking. Story 78. Probably close to 20 years ago, I went out to dinner with my family, and we went to a tiny hole-in-the-wall diner because my dad loves diners. Our server was gorgeous, but dressed like the stereotypical ugly girl in a Hollywood movie. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, thick black glasses, diner uniform. She was so stunning it felt like she was working incognito, like she was an actress trying to pass herself off as a normal person. It was kind of surreal. Story 79. Back in the 1990s, I saw Anna Kournikova at a restaurant in Detroit. This was when she was dating Sergei Fedorov. I am a straight female, and I found it hard not to stare. She was stunning. Story 80. Two women in the same city. I moved to Portland, Oregon, a couple of years ago and found the first place I lived on Craigslist. The family I rented a room from had easily one of the most beautiful women walking the earth living there. Tall, Coke bottle figure and strong as an ox. No makeup in the morning, and she was breathtaking. Also, I currently work with a woman who looks like Jennifer Connelly during her career opportunities era. It is unreal how gorgeous she is. Story 81. Served Jason Momoa. I wasn't even a fan, but in person, wow. I see famous people a lot, but I was embarrassingly flustered. Story 82. A person in my journalism class is half Japanese and half black. He is a handsome individual overall. Of course, he was nice, funny, and incredibly smart. I am straight, but I made a comment to a girl in our class saying, "That guy is really attractive, right?" Her response was, "Unbelievably." His smile was captivating. Story 83, my wife. With each year spent together, we evolve to be better for each other. Nothing can compare to someone who has learned all your secrets. Story 84. When I was 23, I worked in retail, and there was a police officer who would patrol our store after we had a theft. He was the most handsome, kindest, and funniest person I had ever met. I still wonder where he is now. Story 85. There is a girl at my school who I genuinely believe might be the most attractive person currently alive. Truly the most gorgeous woman I have ever seen anywhere. That includes models, actresses, everyone. She clearly won the genetic lottery. A flawless individual. Face, hair, body, skin, eyes. All her features are genuinely perfect. Every single guy I have spoken to about who they find attractive says they think she is extremely beautiful. Every time she posts on Instagram, there are many modeling recruiters in her comment section trying to contact her. I have met her family. They are all average-looking people, but somehow her genetics are incredible. She is mixed race, white and Asian. Story 86. For me, it was a random cashier in a Fred Meyer in Washington State. I was genuinely disoriented by her. She literally looked like an angel, and I am not even saying that as a compliment. That is just how she looked. Edit. She looked like the in-game version of Revenant from Elden Ring Night Rain. Story 87. I've seen too many beautiful women to narrow it down to just one. However, there is one man I have grown to find so gorgeous that it feels like a crime. Mario Perazzi. That man is so stunning I would die with a smile just to have him look at me. Story 88. Sometime between 1992 and 1996, I was walking down Columbus Avenue in New York City with Claudia Winkleman, known for Strictly Come Dancing and the Traitors television shows. We were taking a walk together and chatting when, by accident, I walked right into a woman standing in the street. It was Christy Turlington. No big deal, just a whoops, and that was it. You see this gorgeous model on television and in magazines, and then you're just walking down the street. The next thing you know, you have your arms around Christy Turlington. Just another day in New York City. Story 89. When I was 15, we went to Venice. As I was leaving the city on the transport boat to the transport hub, I saw an amazing woman. She was watching the boats, dressed stylishly yet casually. The sun was low in the sky behind her, and her body was silhouetted as we came nearer. When we docked, I saw her in closer detail. She was just amazing looking, about 17 with flawless skin, gorgeous, exotic. Seemed like the whole package. Looking back, I realized I was just a teenager who had spent a day enjoying the grandeur and beauty of Venice. Story 90. A former teacher of mine was unbelievably attractive. She definitely had an impact on my formative years. Story 91. My cousin's cousin Annette, from the other side of the family, was so beautiful in a girl next door way. No makeup was needed. She was a natural beauty with a personality to match. She did a lot of fashion modeling, too. 50 years later, she is still a head-turner. Come to think of it, her mother was also a natural beauty. Story 92. A random woman at a gas station on Maui. I have to think she was some kind of model or supernatural being. Story 93. A random young woman was walking down the street in Paris in 1997. I can still remember her face. I was with my girlfriend at the time and we both still talk about her. Story 94. A girl in Boston is selling honey and beeswax products at a small business market. She looked like sunshine personified. Story 95. I randomly saw Michelle Pfeiffer one night at the movies. She and her husband were there to see A Dolphin Tale and were dressed amazingly in a second-run movie theater. I have seen better-looking women, but there was something different about her that made it impossible not to stare, even before I realized who she was. It was like she was not even human but a member of some higher species. I realize how ridiculous that sounds, but it was really like that. Story 96. When I was in college, my next-door neighbors were two tragically cool guys. One day, my roommate and I heard they were having a party. Soon, one of the neighbors came to our door and asked if we wanted to join. They were good guys. We followed him, and he immediately introduced us to Miss Oklahoma, who had dropped in for a visit. She was stunningly beautiful and talked to us like we were friends. The runner-up was a girl the drummer in my band dated. She was a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. Flawless beauty and very normal, if you can believe that. Story 97. Janet Cross was in my class at primary school in the mid-1960s. Our teacher would get one of us to sing a song at the end of the day. One day, Janet stood up and sang Lovely Leitrim. I can still remember those moments like they were last week, despite it being 60 years ago. Story 98. She was just a friend of a friend. I was surprised that she was so stunning. I got to know her a bit, and my friend told me a lot about her. She worked as a receptionist, showed up at about 10 a.m., and left around 3 p.m., though she should have been working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. She never brought money anywhere, as everything was paid for her. She dressed casually and always had messy hair. She was also a bit overweight and honestly seemed like she had not taken a shower for a few days. Still, she was exceptionally attractive. Story 99. Saw a girl in an airport once who looked like heartbreak had a favorite face. Never spoke, just passed by. Still haunts the back of my brain like a favorite ghost. Story 100. I met a man in my 20s who looked like Jesus. He had long, lush, beautiful, never tangled sandy blonde hair. He had piercing blue eyes, a carpenter's build, and I am not exaggerating when I say his genital area and general body odor always smelled like clean cotton freshness. Even after a full day of hiking, it smelled like fresh linen. It was unusual. We had some fun, but he turned out to have many personal struggles, so we went separate ways. We hooked up again about 5 years ago, and the scent was still pleasant. I asked him about any artificial fragrances. A few years ago, my old friend married this man's brother. We have known each other for 30 years, so I asked her directly how his scent smelled. She told me it smelled like clean linen. We concluded that they naturally smell that way. Story 101. My replacement at work. I left for another job but visited my old coworkers a few months later. There was a girl I thought to myself was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. I saw her a few times whenever I was invited to an outing with that group. We didn't interact much, but I remember being nervous around her and felt like she was nervous around me too. I never asked her out and later found out she had a boyfriend after leaving that job. Story 102. Honestly, my current partner. I have never looked at another woman's figure and felt the same intensity of butterflies in my stomach before. Story 103. I think the attractive factor can change. When I was a teenager, it was certain boys in my high school. As an adult, it was my husband. Now single, I think Idris Elba. Story 104. My friend from high school was a grade above me, and somehow we became friends. She is one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen in person. Even now, after all these years, I still get jitters when she texts me. Story 105. A girl I went to high school with. Her name is Shelley, and she is just as beautiful today. It is too bad I was too much of a coward to talk to her back then. Story 106. At Comic-Con in 2015, Dina Meyer was there, and I was literally speechless and in awe. This was 12 years after the movie, so she was around 46 years old. No modifications at the time. Nothing upgraded or changed. Just spectacular beauty with a natural, gleaming smile. I will never get that out of my head. Story 107. My cousin's house party. God, he was gorgeous. Literally, everyone stopped when the man was walking in. My aunt said, "I need to introduce you to my daughter." My cousin, who is very pretty, not stunning like him but pretty, was approached by him. She wasn't interested and left the interaction. Then I tried. I'm pretty, but maybe he thought he was out of my league, which is okay, and he left. I know he was probably just a playboy, but still, I asked my cousin, "Girl, why was that guy sent down from the angels?" And I mean, it truly was a movie moment, how every person stopped in his path. Story 108. A random girl at summer camp named Audrey. Good lord, she is cute. Probably not everyone's type, but she is stunning. We follow each other on Instagram, but I doubt we will ever talk. She lives far away and was not tremendously interested in me. Story 109. In my experience, it was a stranger walking down the street who was very handsome. A couple of times I have had men give me eye contact while squinting their eyes, and I would do the same. If I could freeze time right then and there, I am sure something would have happened. They were basically giving me intense eye contact, and it was quite nice but without any action, just the sexy staring. Story 110. The lady I am dating now. My goodness. Her killer smile and golden brown eyes are positively mesmerizing, along with a perfect figure. But the bonus is that she is an angel on earth. She is, to me, the kindest human I have ever met and very down to earth. A heart of gold and not a mean bone in her body. Story 111. It was a counselor at a church camp when I was 13. I was not raised going to church and was just there because my friend was there. I was irritated that my parents sent me until I got there and met our counselor. I think they talked about some guy named Jesus, but the thing I remember the most is her. Story 112. We were at Yale doing an informal tour in our car with our then Gilmore Girls obsessed daughter. We stopped at a stop sign, and Anderson Cooper crossed in front of our car. My wife and daughter were dumbstruck by how beautiful he was. Recently, I was in a store in the Outer Banks, and the girl working the register was astonishingly beautiful. Story 113. Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. I literally couldn't breathe. The strange thing is I have never seen a photo that even comes close to capturing the absolute perfection of her appearance. I was a waitress, and my boss, who was roommates with John F. Kennedy Jr. at boarding school or something, told me that John Jr. hung out randomly. This was when Carolyn and John Jr. were dating, almost engaged maybe. To this day, I can't believe how poorly she was portrayed in photos. They didn't do her any justice. I'm also unusual because I didn't think John was that insanely attractive. He was photogenic and the camera loved him, but he was just cute. Plain but cute. And a bad tipper. Bless. Story 114. Tom Brady. I am not gay, and I am not a New England Patriots fan. But peak Tom Brady was exceptionally attractive. I saw him 5 feet away in civilian clothes, and my sister would not stop laughing at me for how I stared at him. Story 115. I was at the Planet Hollywood opening in 1995. Cindy Crawford was there. I cannot imagine seeing someone that beautiful in person again. It will be a banner day if I do. Story 116. Haven't seen him in person, but I fear I will make a fool of myself if I ever meet Jimmy Garoppolo in person. Story 117. Random German boy on a train, maybe 10 years ago. He looked like an angel. I have never seen anyone like him again. Story 118. In person, I used to work in a sign shop with a woman who had recently appeared in a bikini calendar for a local radio station. Having a conversation with her was distracting. I felt like my intelligence quotient dropped 20 points every time. Story 119. A waiter at the Rincon Tapatio Mexican restaurant in Spokane, Washington. I was so nervous and flustered I could not eat. Very handsome. Story 120. I will preface by saying I do enjoy the lovely eye candy, but I'm not thirsty. Normally, I couldn't care less, and I'm not on the prowl in general. One day, while my father and I were traveling during COVID-19, we had a layover in Oakland. My father and I deplaned, and I walked ahead of him, normally in my own world. Then I heard my father say, "Go Raiders." And the absolute sexiest voice I've ever heard in my life responded, "Go Raiders." I immediately turned my head to find that voice. My father told me it was the Raiders' offensive head coach. I thought, damn sexy man. Story 121. A random German girl on holiday in Cyprus around 1998. Olive skin, long dark brown hair, wearing an Adidas bikini. No one else I have ever seen comes close. Story 122. We went on a tour of the D-Day beaches in Normandy, France. I thought the tour guide was nice looking. Not bad, but okay. After the tour, my husband leaned over to me and said, "That was the best looking man I have ever talked to." Cracked me up. Who, him? Okay. Story 123. I went to high school with a girl next door type, but perfected. She was very nice and sweet. I saw her every day, so I never really thought much of it. I also saw a soldier at a hotel where I worked who looked very much like Jake Gyllenhaal, probably the most attractive man I have ever seen in person. Story 124. Anna Kournikova peaked by breaking onto the scene fresh-faced and sporty. She was lucky enough to be close up, so to speak, and went on to be voted the sexiest girl in the world a few years later. Story 125. Walking the Los Angeles River, there was a woman. I was trying not to look at her, but when I did, I felt a strange feeling. She was looking at me too, but in a knowing way. I cannot even remember what she looked like, but I remember what I felt. Story 126. One of my neighbors won Miss Universe in 2001. She is very nice and down to earth and still visits her mother often. She is also absolutely the most beautiful person in the room everywhere she goes. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.